Welcome back to Paranightmares, where the night whispers and we listen. If creepy tales and unsettling shadows are your kind of lullaby, you're in the right place. Before we descend into tonight's darkness, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. After you finish the video, let us know which part made your skin crawl most. I'm watching, and I read everyone. The wallets in the outback. The Australian outback sprawled like a fever dream, its red dirt baking under a sun that seemed to pulse with malice. Claire and Ethan, university students on a gap-year trek, followed a faint trail in the Northern Territory, hours from Alice Springs. Claire, a biology major, carried a sketchbook for desert flora, her pencil worn from hours of drawing spinifex and gnarled desert oaks. Ethan, an anthropology student, clutched a camera, chasing rumors of ancient rock art hidden in the cliffs. Their rented 4x4 waited at a trailhead marked by a rusted sign, the only trace of civilization in this vast, empty land. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crunch of their boots and the drone of cicadas. But by midday, the isolation felt less freeing and more like a weight pressing on their chests. They'd started at dawn, packs heavy with water, granola bars, and the satellite phone Claire's dad had insisted on. The trail was brutal. Thorny acacias snagged their clothes, and jagged rocks tripped them up. Claire's sketches filled pages, her hands smudged with graphite as she captured the stark beauty of a desert pea. Ethan snapped photos of eroded cliff faces, muttering about petroglyphs he was sure were close. Around noon, they stopped at the base of a low cliff, its shadow a brief reprieve from the heat. Claire dropped her pack, her shirt clinging to her sweat-soaked back when Ethan froze, pointing to a glint in the scrub, a plastic bag, tightly knotted, half buried under a thorn bush. "That's not right," Ethan said, his voice low. The bag looked deliberate, out of place in the untouched outback. Claire's stomach churned. She'd read a story online about hikers finding strange items, wallets, jewelry, linked to missing people. "Could be trash," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. The bag was too neat, too heavy-looking for litter. Ethan knelt, his fingers hesitant as he untied the knots. Inside were 6 wallets, the leather cracked and faded, stuffed with IDs, credit cards, and crumpled receipts. Claire peered over his shoulder, her breath catching. The names were all women's, ages 18 to 25, from places like Sydney, Perth, and Darwin. One ID showed a smiling girl with Claire's hazel eyes, the photo yellowed but recent. "These aren't random," Ethan whispered, his face pale. "Look at the dates, last year, this year." Claire's mind raced to the article. A hiker found a bag of belongings in the woods, later tied to a string of disappearances. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. No signal, just like the story warned about remote trails. "We need to leave," she said, stepping back, her eyes scanning the horizon. The cliffs loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows shifting as clouds passed overhead. A low hum broke the silence, like an engine rumbling across the plain. Claire froze, her heart pounding. The trailhead was miles away, and they'd seen no other vehicles. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a boulder, its surface hot against her skin. The hum grew louder, tires crunching on gravel, then stopped. Boots hit the ground, heavy and deliberate, echoing off the cliffs. Claire peeked out, her pulse thundering. A man stood by the bag, tall and lean, in a dusty jacket and wide-brimmed hat that hid his eyes. A rifle hung from his shoulder, its barrel glinting in the sun. "Come out," he called, his voice flat, carrying a faint Aussie drawl. "I know you're here." Claire clutched the satellite phone, its screen blank, no signal this deep in the outback. Ethan's eyes were wide, his hand gripping a rock. "He saw us," he whispered. Claire's mind flashed to the wallets, trophies, maybe, from women who'd hiked this trail and never returned. She'd read about predators in the outback, men who hunted travelers in places too remote for help. The man's boots crunched closer, methodical, like he was savoring the chase. Claire fumbled with the phone, typing a message to her friend in Alice Springs. Found wallets on trail. Man with gun. Help. She hit send, praying it would cue. The man stopped, kneeling by the bag. He pulled out a wallet, flipping it open, then looked straight at their boulder. "You took something that's mine," he said, his tone chillingly calm. Claire's heart stopped. How did he know they'd touched it? Had he been watching from the cliffs, hidden in the scrub? Ethan whispered, "We run on 3. Claire nodded, her legs trembling. He counted softly, then hurled the rock, striking the man's shoulder. The man grunted, stumbling, and they bolted, sprinting along the cliff's base, thorns tearing at their clothes. The trail twisted into a narrow gully, its walls tight and cool, offering temporary cover. Claire's breath came in gasps, her pack bouncing painfully. A gunshot cracked, dirt spraying from the gully wall. She screamed, ducking as Ethan pulled her deeper. The man's shouts echoed behind them, raw and angry. "You can't hide." The gully opened to a dry riverbed, its banks exposed, no trees to shield them. Another shot rang out, closer, kicking up dust near Claire's boots. Ethan yanked her behind a fallen tree, its bark rough against her palms. Claire checked the satellite phone, still no signal. The man's footsteps grew louder, deliberate, like he knew exactly where they were. "He's tracking us," Ethan panted, his eyes darting. Claire's mind raced to the article. A hiker stalked by a stranger who seemed to know their every move. Had he seen them at the trailhead, followed their dust trail? The Wallets' faces haunted her. Young women, like her, who trusted the outback's beauty. They crawled through the riverbed, staying low, thorns slicing their hands. The footsteps paused, and Claire dared to hope he'd lost them. Then a shadow loomed across the bank, a silhouette, rifle raised, scanning the horizon. "I just want my things back," he called, his voice carrying a mocking edge. Claire clutched Ethan's arm, her nails digging in. The Wallets weren't his, they were evidence, proof of something monstrous. Time dragged, the heat suffocating. Claire's throat was dry, her water bottle nearly empty. A distant rumble broke the silence, not an engine, but a helicopter's thrum. The man froze, his silhouette tense, then bolted into the scrub, his steps fading. Claire and Ethan stayed hidden, trembling, until the chopper landed, rangers spilling out with rifles drawn. Claire sobbed, showing them the bag. The rangers' faces darkened. They recognized the names. The Wallets belonged to missing hikers. Women vanished over 2 years, their cases unsolved. The rangers escorted them back to the trailhead, the man's tracks swallowed by the outback. Claire and Ethan drove to Alice Springs, silent. The Wallets' faces burned into their minds. They never hiked again. The outback's beauty tainted by the echo of boots and the weight of what they'd found. The Phantom parking lot. The Appalachian Trail in Virginia was a world of tangled green, its pines and oaks weaving a canopy that swallowed the sky. Mia, a 29-year-old software analyst from Richmond, had dreamed of this hike for months, a solo escape from her cubicle's fluorescent hum and weight of a year spent debugging code and dodging office politics. Her backpack, stuffed with a tent, water filter, and trail mix, felt heavier with every step, but the trail's quiet was a balm, its switchbacks promising freedom. 2 days in, she met Jake at a lean-to, a lanky hiker with a quick smile and a worn red bandana, heading the same way. They teamed up, sharing stories of city life and stale granola bars, their boots crunching in rhythm as they tackled a 20-mile stretch through dense forest toward a parking lot where Mia's blue Jeep and Jake's red pickup waited. By late afternoon, the sun hung low, painting the trail in jagged shadows. Mia's legs ached, her boots caked with mud from a morning drizzle. The map showed the parking lot was still an hour away, a fact that gnawed at her as the light faded. Through a gap in the pines, they saw it. A parking lot, cars glinting in the dying sun. Mia's Jeep was there, its dented fender unmistakable, parked beside a red sedan and a black truck. Jake froze, squinting. "That's my pickup. Same red car next to it." Mia's stomach twisted. The lot was too close, too real. She'd read about hikers hallucinating on long treks, like the story of two friends seeing a parking lot that wasn't there, only to find danger lurking. It's exhaustion, she said, her voice thin, but the clarity of the scene, the glint of chrome, the Jeep's faded bumper sticker, felt wrong, like the forest was playing a trick. They laughed nervously, blaming tired eyes, but the lot stayed vivid, maybe 50 feet away through the trees. Jake adjusted his pack, his fingers fidgeting with the strap. "Let's check it," he said, stepping off the trail into soft earth, pine needles cushioning his steps. Mia hesitated, her mind flashing to the article. Hikers lured off paths by strange sights, some vanishing into the woods. "We're seeing things," she said, gripping her map. But Jake was already moving, his silhouette blending with the trees. Reluctantly, she followed, her heart pounding, the forest silence swallowing the usual chatter of birds and squirrels. The trees thickened, branches clawing at her jacket, the air growing cooler as the sun dipped below the ridge. The parking lot vanished, replaced by a tangle of underbrush and towering pines. Mia's breath caught. "We saw it," Jake insisted, turning in circles, his voice edged with panic. A faint hum started, like distant car engines, vibrating through the ground. Mia grabbed her phone, no signal, the screen mocking her with its blank bars. She typed a text to her sister, Lila, her fingers trembling. "Saw parking lot, that's not here. Off trail." Scared, the hum grew louder, and a light flickered through the trees, like headlights sweeping the path. "Someone's out there," Jake whispered, pulling her behind a fallen log, its bark damp and moss-slicked. The hum stopped, replaced by footsteps, heavy, deliberate, snapping twigs with purpose. Mia peeked over the log, her pulse racing like a drum in her ears. A figure moved through the trees, tall, in a dark coat, holding something long. Rifle, its barrel catching the last light. The article's warning echoed. Hikers seeing impossible things, stalked by someone who shouldn't exist. The figure paused, head turning, as if sensing their gaze. "Hey!" A man's voice called, low and rough, carrying across the clearing. "You lost out here." Mia's blood ran cold, her breath shallow. She whispered to Jake, "Don't answer." They crouched lower, thorns digging into their palms, the log's dampness soaking through their clothes. The footsteps circled closer, the man's shadow looming against a tree, elongated and warped. Mia dialed 911, her voice barely audible over her pounding heart. "We're on the Appalachian Trail, mile 342. Someone's following us. We saw a parking lot that's not here." The operator's voice crackled, faint through the weak signal. "Stay hidden. Rangers are 20 minutes out. Describe the person." "He's tall, dark coat, maybe a rifle," Mia whispered, her eyes locked on the shadow. The footsteps stopped, maybe 10 feet away, the man's boots crunching softly, deliberately. "I know you're there," he said, his tone calm but laced with menace, like a hunter toying with prey. Mia's mind raced. She pictured the hikers in the article, drawn off trails into traps. Had he set up the illusion? Some trick with lights to lure them? Jake gripped her hand, his knuckles white, his breath ragged. The footsteps moved away, then returned closer, a twig snapping like a gunshot in the silence. Another sound joined, a second set of footsteps, lighter, faster, from the opposite direction. Mia's heart stopped. A shorter figure, hooded, appeared at the clearing's edge, silent, watching. The article hadn't mentioned pairs, but the fear was the same. Hikers stalked, outnumbered. "Run," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. They bolted, sprinting through the underbrush, branches tearing at their skin, their packs bouncing painfully. The footsteps followed, 2 sets now, relentless, weaving through the trees like wolves on a scent. Mia's lungs burned, her boots slipping on pine needles, the forest a labyrinth with no exit. They stumbled into a creek, the water icy, soaking their legs. Mia pulled Jake behind a boulder, its surface slick with algae, their breaths loud in the dark. The footsteps paused, then split, one set circling left, the other right, as if coordinating. Mia's phone buzzed Lila's reply, "Call Rangers." "I'm calling too." No signal to respond, but the text had sent, a faint hope. "They're hunting us," Jake whispered, his eyes wide, reflecting the moon sliver through the trees. Mia clutched her pocket knife, its blade small but sharp, her hands trembling as she pictured the article's hikers, cornered with nowhere to go. The forest was a void now, the only sounds their breaths and the distant drip of water. The footsteps resumed closer, the taller figure's boots heavier, the hooded ones lighter, almost silent. Mia's mind churned. Had they been watched all day? Their camp at the lean-to scouted? The parking lot's image haunted her, so vivid, so impossible. A low whistle pierced the air, chillingly human, like a signal between the two. Mia's skin crawled. The article mentioned eerie sounds, lures to draw hikers out. She whispered to the operator, still on the line. 2 people now. They're close. "Rangers are 15 minutes out," the operator said, her voice a lifeline. "Find cover, stay low." Mia and Jake pressed against the boulder, the creek's cold seeping into their bones. A shadow moved, the taller figure, now 20 feet away, his coat blending with the dark. The hooded figure appeared across the creek, motionless, a silhouette against the trees. Mia's heart pounded so loud, she was sure they'd hear it. The taller man spoke again, closer, his voice a growl. "You can't hide forever." Time stretched, the forest a prison of shadows and cold. Mia's legs cramped, her fingers numb around the knife. A faint shout broke the silence. National Park Service. Followed by the crunch of multiple boots, flashlights sweeping like beacons. The figures froze, then bolted, their footsteps fading into the trees. Mia and Jake stayed hidden, trembling, until a ranger's voice called. "Mia? Jake? It's safe." They emerged, shaking, their clothes torn, faces streaked with mud. The rangers searched, finding tire tracks near the trail, fresh, but leading nowhere, and a discarded flashlight, its beam strong enough to mimic headlights through the trees. No lot existed at mile 342, they confirmed, their faces grim. The tracks matched boots from an unsolved missing hiker case, but no one was caught. Mia and Jake reached the real parking lot at dawn, their cars untouched, the Jeep's dented fender a mocking reminder of the vision. Mia quit hiking, the forest silence now a scream in her dreams, the phantom lot and its watchers a shadow she couldn't shake. The whispers in the fog. The Pacific Crest Trail in Washington was a realm of mist and mystery, its towering firs and cedar groves cloaked in fog that curled like ghostly fingers. Lena, a 32-year-old freelance photographer from Seattle, hiked alone, her camera a constant companion, its lens capturing the eerie beauty of moss-draped branches and mist-shrouded peaks. She planned a 3-day loop to escape her cramped apartment's noise, neighbors arguing, sirens wailing, and find inspiration for her next gallery show. Her pack held lenses, a tripod, and a journal, but the trail solitude was her real prize, a chance to breathe in the quiet. By dusk on her second day, the fog thickened, swallowing trail markers and turning the forest into a labyrinth of gray. Lena's map was useless, her compass needle spinning wildly, as if the earth itself was confused. She'd read about hikers hearing strange voices, like the woman who heard whispers in the fog, only to find no one there. The story had seemed like campfire hype, but now, as the forest silence pressed against her ears, it felt real. Lena's boots sank into damp earth, the trail slick with mud and pine needles. Her flashlight's beam barely pierced the mist, creating a halo that made every shadow seem alive. The air smelled of wet moss and decay, heavy with the weight of something unseen. She stopped to check her phone, no signal. The screen's glow harsh in the gloom. A faint whisper broke the silence, like a voice carried on the wind, too soft to decipher. A murmur of syllables that felt almost human. Lena froze, her heart racing, her camera strapped tight against her chest. "Hello," she called, her voice swallowed by the fog, sounding small and fragile. No answer, but the whisper came again, closer, a soft chant from multiple directions, overlapping like a chorus. Her mind flashed to the article. Hikers hearing voices, thinking it was their group, only to find themselves alone. She clutched her camera, snapping photos blindly. The shutters clicked loud in the stillness, hoping to capture proof she wasn't losing her mind. The fog swirled, thicker now, and a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision, tall, thin, gone when she turned her head. Her breath hitched as she dialed 911, her fingers trembling. The call connected briefly, then dropped, but she whispered to the void, "I'm on the PCT, mile 180, hearing voices in the fog." She typed a text to her roommate, Claire, hearing whispers on trail. "Fog's bad." Scared, the whispers grew, circling her, words like fragments of a language she didn't know. Hiss, Sarah, Van. Lena's skin crawled. She hadn't told anyone her plans beyond Claire, yet the whispers felt personal, like they knew her. She quickened her pace, the trail winding into a ravine, its walls steep and slick with moisture. The whispers followed, louder, a cadence that matched her steps. Her flashlight caught glints in the fog eyes. "No, just dew on leaves," she told herself, but her heart pounded harder. Footsteps joined the whispers, soft but deliberate, crunching pine needles behind her. Lena swung her light, the beam shaking, but saw only mist. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking, echoing off the ravine's walls. A low laugh answered, chillingly human, from the fog's heart, sending a shiver down her spine. Lena ran, her boots slipping, the trail a blur of mud and roots. The footsteps followed, keeping pace, never overtaking but always there, like a shadow stitched to her heels. Her pack bounced, her camera banging against her ribs. She stumbled into a clearing, a derelict cabin looming in the mist, its windows black voids, roof sagging under years of neglect. The article mentioned abandoned structures, hideouts for drifters or worse. Lena hesitated, her breath ragged, then slipped inside, the door creaking on rusted hinges. She barred it with a rotting chair, its wood soft under her hands, and crouched behind a splintered table, her flashlight off to avoid detection. The whispers resumed, outside now, circling the cabin like a pack of wolves. "Lena," a voice said, soft and clear, cutting through the fog. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't spoken her name out here. The article's story echoed, voices knowing things they shouldn't, luring hikers into traps. She gripped her camera, its weight grounding her, and peered through a cracked window. A shadow moved, tall and blurred, its outline shifting in the mist. The whispers grew, chorus now, chanting words she couldn't grasp, their tone hungry, expectant. A knock came, slow and deliberate, rattling the door. "Lena, come out," the voice said, almost gentle, like a friend calling her to dinner. Her heart stopped. The knocking grew louder, the chair shifting, with creaking under pressure. Lena's phone buzzed, no signal, but Claire's reply called Rangers. "Stay safe." The text had sent, a faint lifeline. She whispered a prayer, the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing, its tendrils seeping through cracks. The shadow outside moved closer, its silhouette sharpening, a figure in a tattered coat, face hidden, standing inches from the glass. The knocking stopped, replaced by scratching, like nails dragging across wood, slow and deliberate. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps, her body pressed against the table, its edges digging into her back. The article's warning replayed, hikers trapped, voices closing in. The scratching paused, and a new sound joined, a soft hum, like a lullaby from multiple directions. Her mind raced. Were there more out there, hidden in the fog? She pictured Claire's apartment, her cat curled on the couch, the life she'd taken for granted now a distant dream. Hours dragged, the cabin's air cold and damp, the hum relentless. A faint shout broke through. National Park Service. Followed by the crunch of boots, flashlights slicing the fog. The whispers stopped, the shadows fleeing, their footsteps fading into the mist. Lena stayed hidden, trembling, until a ranger's voice called. "Lena Harper? It's safe." She pushed the chair aside, her hand shaking, and stumbled out. The fog still thick, but less oppressive. The rangers searched, finding footprints circling the cabin, fresh but untraceable, and a rusted knife left by the door. its blade etched with strange symbols. Lena showed them her photos, blurry shapes in the fog, too vague to identify, but enough to make the rangers' faces tighten. They'd found similar signs before, linked to missing hikers, but no culprits. Lena left at dawn, her camera full of useless images, her journal blank. The fog followed her back to Seattle, its whispers echoing in her sleep, a name she couldn't unhear. The doll in the woods. The Adirondacks in upstate New York were a rugged tapestry of pines, maples, and rocky trails, their beauty a stark contrast to the city's clamor. Sam, a 34-year-old history teacher from Syracuse, and his younger sister Tara, a nurse, hiked a lesser-known loop during summer break, seeking a break from their hectic lives. Sam carried a pack stuffed with camping gear, tent, stove, a worn copy of a Civil War journal he read at night. Tara, always practical, brought medical supplies and a wildflower guide, her eyes scanning the forest for blooms. The trail was muddy from recent rain, its steep climbs slick under their boots. They'd read about hikers finding odd objects, like a child's doll hung in a tree, and laughed it off as creepy folklore. But as the forest darkened under gathering clouds, its silence felt heavy, like a held breath. By mid-afternoon, they reached a stream, its water cold and clear, cutting through a grove of birches. Tara stopped, her breath catching, and pointed to a low branch. A rag doll hung there, its stitched face smudged with dirt, one button eye missing, the other glinting dully. Its arms were tied to the branch with twine, deliberate, not dropped. "That's creepy," Tara said, her laugh forced, her hands fidgeting with her water bottle. Sam's gut twisted. The doll looked placed, like a marker. He remembered the article. A hiker found a doll in a tree, later spotting a figure watching from the woods. "Kids messing around," he said, but the nearest town was miles away, and the twine was fresh, not weathered. They moved on, the doll's blank stare burning into Sam's mind. The trail wound deeper, the air cooler, the trees denser, their branches knitting a canopy that blocked the sky. Tara checked her phone, no signal. The screen's glow stark against the gloom. A faint rustle came from the underbrush, like footsteps pacing them, too rhythmic for an animal. Sam glanced back, seeing only shadows, but his heart quickened. The article warned of hikers feeling watched after finding strange objects, their unease growing into terror. He tightened his grip on his pack straps, his pocket knife heavy in his pocket. Tara's face was pale, her eyes darting to the trees. At dusk, they reached a lake, its surface still under the gray sky. They set up camp, pitching their tent near the water, the ground soft with pine needles. Sam built a fire, its crackle a frail defense against the dark. Tara sat close, her knees pulled up, her wildflower guide forgotten. The rustling returned, closer, circling the clearing like a predator. "You heard that, right?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sam nodded, his jaw tight, and swept his flashlight across the trees. Nothing, but the shadows seemed to shift, deeper than they should be. The article story echoed, campers seeing figures just beyond the firelight, their presence undeniable. A twig snapped, loud and deliberate, maybe 20 feet away. Sam stood, his knife out, its blade catching the fire's glow. "Stay here," he told Tara, stepping toward the trees, his flashlight shaking. A low whistle answered, clear and human, like a signal cutting through the night. Tara grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "Don't go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The whistle came again, from another direction, joined by footsteps, multiple sets, circling tighter. Sam's heart pounded as he pulled Tara back to the fire, its flames dwindling. He dialed 911, call dropping instantly. "We're camping at Lake Colden, Adirondacks," he whispered, hoping it recorded. "Someone's outside. Found a weird doll." Tara texted their mom. Heard noises at camp. Doll and tree. Scared. The footsteps grew closer, crunching pine needles, deliberate and unhurried. Sam's flashlight caught movement, a shadow, tall and human-shaped, darting behind a tree. Tara stifled a gasp, clutching a rock. Another shadow moved, smaller, on the opposite side of the clearing. The article hadn't mentioned groups, but the fear was the same. Hikers surrounded, trapped. A thump hit the ground near the fire, sparking embers. Sam swung his light. A second doll, identical to the first, lay there, its one eye glinting, twine still tied to its arms. Tara screamed, dropping her rock. "Sam!" A voice called from the trees, low and unfamiliar, chilling in its clarity. His name, Hal. They hadn't spoken it aloud. The footsteps tightened their circle, shadows flickering like ghosts in the firelight. Sam grabbed Tara, pulling her into the tent, zipping it shut, the nylon walls feeling flimsy, useless. Inside, their breaths were loud, the air thick with fear. The footsteps continued, circling, a soft laugh joining them, cold and mocking. "Tara," the voice said, closer, as if pressed against the tent. Her eyes widened, tears streaming down her face. Sam clutched his knife, his mind racing to the article. Hikers stalked, their names known by unseen watchers. The tent's walls shook, a hand brushing the fabric, deliberate and slow. Sam whispered to Tara, "Stay quiet." Her phone buzzed, no signal, but her text had sent a faint hope. The night stretched, the fire outside dying to embers, the shadows growing bolder. A low chant started, words indistinct but rhythmic, like a ritual. Sam's skin crawled. He pictured the doll's makers, some group hiding in the woods, marking their prey. The article mentioned no chance, but the terror was the same. Hikers cornered, their fear feeding something unseen. The brushing on the tent stopped, replaced by scratching, like nails carving patterns. Sam's hand shook, the knife slick with sweat. A distant shout broke the silence. National Park Service. Followed by the crunch of boots, flashlights slicing through the dark. The footsteps fled, scattering into the trees, the chant fading. Sam and Tara stayed frozen, trembling, until a ranger's voice called, "Sam? Tara? It's safe." They unzipped the tent, stumbling out, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. The rangers searched, finding footprints circling the camp, too many for one person, and a third doll, half buried near the lake, its twine fresh. The dolls matched others found in missing hiker cases, their origins unknown, no culprits caught. Sam and Tara packed up at dawn, the lake's beauty tainted. The dolls' single eyes burned into their minds. They drove back to Syracuse, the forest shadows clinging to them, their names in the dark a wound that wouldn't heal. The abandoned mine. The Rockies in Colorado were a jagged fortress of granite and pine, the trails cutting through valleys where the air was thin and sharp. Ryan, a 27-year-old hiker from Denver, and his friend Kyle, geologist, tackled a remote path near an old mining town, chasing rumors of an abandoned shaft said to hold rare quartz. Ryan's pack was heavy with climbing gear, ropes, carabiners, a headlamp, his enthusiasm for adventure outweighing his fatigue. Kyle carried a notebook for rock samples, his eyes scanning the ground for glints of mica or feldspar. The trail was overgrown, barely marked, winding through boulder fields and dense firs. They'd read about hikers finding eerie sites, like a mine with strange carvings, and dismissed it as local legend. But by noon, the forest silence felt oppressive, the air thick with dust and pine. They found the mine's entrance in a rocky gully, its wooden beams rotted, a rusted chain dangling across the opening like a warning. Symbols were carved into the rock, spirals, jagged lines, unlike any graffiti Ryan had seen. Kyle knelt, tracing them with a gloved finger, his face uneasy. "These aren't natural," he said, his voice echoing faintly. Ryan's stomach nodded. The article mentioned a hiker finding a mine with markings, later hearing screams inside. "Let's explore," he said, pushing past his unease, his headlamp casting a narrow beam into the dark. Kyle hesitated, then followed, his flashlight shaking slightly. The tunnel was damp, smelling of earth and rusted metal, its walls glistening with moisture. Their boots echoed, sound swallowed by the dark. A faint tapping started, like metal on stone, rhythmic and deliberate. Ryan paused, his heart racing. "Dripping water," Kyle said, but his tone was tight, his eyes darting. The tapping grew louder, a steady beat, like a signal from deep within. Ryan's mind flashed to the article. Hikers hearing noises in abandoned sites, followed by shadows that didn't belong. They pushed deeper, the tunnel sloping down, narrowing until their packs scraped the walls. The air grew colder, the tapping joined by a low hum, like machinery long dead, vibrating through the rock. Ryan's headlamp caught something. A pile of rusted tools, a torn backpack, and a single hiking boot, its laces frayed, abandoned in the dust. "Someone's been here," he whispered, his voice barely carrying. Kyle nodded, his face pale, his flashlight sweeping the tunnel. The hum intensified, shaking loose dirt from the ceiling. Footsteps echoed behind them, heavy and fast, too purposeful for a cave-in. Ryan swung his light. Nothing, just darkness. But the footsteps grew closer, relentless. He fumbled for his phone, no signal, and whispered to the void. "We're in a mine off Trail 47, Rockies. Someone's following us." The call dropped, but he texted his brother, an old mine, hearing steps. "Help!" The footsteps stopped, then resumed, now joined by a scraping, like metal dragging on rock. A shadow flickered at the tunnel's bend, tall and distorted, its edges blurring in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here." The voice rasped, low and guttural, echoing through the shaft. Ryan's heart stopped. The article warned of hikers trapped in mines, stalked by unseen figures. He grabbed Kyle, sprinting for the entrance, their headlamps bouncing wildly. The hum grew deafening, the walls trembling, dust clouding the air. The shadow moved, blocking the way out, its outline sharpening. A figure in tattered clothes, holding a pickaxe. Kyle threw a rock, the shadow shifting as it struck the wall. They veered into a side tunnel, its ceiling low, forcing them to crouch. The footsteps followed, joined by a second set, lighter but just as relentless. The tunnel twisted, narrowing, the air thick with dust. Ryan's lungs burned, his pack scraping the walls. The scraping sound returned, closer, like the pickaxe testing the rock. "They're boxing us in," Kyle panted, his flashlight flickering. They reached a dead end, a collapsed shaft, rocks piled high. The footsteps stopped, the hum a roar now, shaking the tunnel. Ryan clutched his knife, its blade small against the dark. Kyle gripped a rock, his hand shaking. A low laugh echoed, chillingly close, as if the figure was inches away. Ryan's mind raced. He pictured the miner stories, the carvings, the boot's owner, lost in this maze. Had they been watched from the trailhead, their gear noted? The article mentioned no groups, but the fear was the same. Hikers cornered, their escape cut off. A faint shout broke through. National Park Service. Followed by the crunch of boots, flashlights piercing the dark. The shadows fled, their footsteps scattering, the hum fading. Ryan and Kyle stayed pressed against the rocks, trembling, until a ranger's voice called. "Ryan? Kyle, it's safe." They stumbled out, coughing dust, their faces streaked with grime. The rangers searched, finding more carvings deeper in the mine, matching one's link to missing hikers, and a bloodstained glove, its fingers torn. The symbols were old, the rangers said, but the glove was fresh, no owner found. Ryan and Kyle drove back to Denver. The mines hum a pulse in their dreams, the shadows voice a scar they couldn't erase. The figure on the ridge, the Sierra Nevada in California, was a wild expanse of granite peaks and sprawling pine forests, its trails carved through rugged terrain where the air was thin and sharp. Ellie, a 30-year-old graphic designer from San Francisco, had spent months hunched over her tablet, churning out logos for clients who never seemed satisfied. This hike was her rebellion against deadlines and emails, a chance to sketch the alpine lakes that shimmered like sapphires in the high country. Her pack was light, built for speed, with a sketchbook, pencils, and a water bottle clipped to the side. She teamed up with Nate, an off-duty park ranger with a lean build and a quiet confidence, his pack holding a map, first aid kit, and a worn knife he carried from years on the job. They'd met at a trailhead, bonding over shared stories of city stress, and a love for the mountain silence. The trail was steep, winding through boulder fields and meadows dusted with wildflowers, its isolation a thrill until clouds rolled in, graying the peaks and casting a chill over the afternoon. They'd read about hikers seeing unexplained figures, like a man on a ridge who vanished without a trace, and laughed it off as mountain lore. But as the light dimmed, the silence felt heavy, like the forest was holding its breath, watching their every step. By late afternoon, they reached a lookout perched on a rocky outcrop, the lake below a glassy mirror reflecting the stormy sky. Ellie paused to sketch, her pencil scratching out the jagged peaks, while Nate scanned the valley, his eyes sharp from years of patrolling. He froze, pointing across the valley to a distant ridge. A figure stood there, motionless, its dark silhouette stark against the gray clouds. It was too far to make out details, but its posture was rigid, unnatural, like a statue carved from shadow. "Another hiker," Nate said, but his voice was tight, his hand resting on his knife. Ellie raised her binoculars, her heart quickening. The figure wore a tattered jacket, no pack, no gear, just standing, staring their way, its head tilted as if it could see them through the distance. The article story flashed through her mind. A hiker saw a figure on a ridge, later finding tracks where none should be. The sense of being watched growing into terror. They waved, a reflex, but the figure didn't move, its stillness chilling in the wind that rustled the pines. Ellie lowered the binoculars, her hands trembling, the lenses smudged with sweat. "That's no hiker," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the breeze. The air grew colder, a faint whistle cutting through the wind, like a human mimicking a bird, sharp and deliberate. Ellie checked her phone, no signal, the mountain's granite walls blocking everything. "Let's keep moving," she said, her throat dry, the sketchbook forgotten in her pack. They descended, the trail slick with loose gravel, the whistle following, closer now, echoing off the peaks like a signal meant for them. Nate's face was grim. He knew these trails, had patrolled them for years, and no one should be out here, not this late, not alone. Footsteps crunched behind them, faint but deliberate, matching their pace through a grove of twisted pines. Ellie's heart raced as she fumbled with her phone, dialing 911, her voice a whisper. "We're on the PCT, mile 112. Someone's following us. Saw a figure on a ridge." The call dropped, the signal dead, but she texted Nate's ranger station. "Figure watching us. Hearing steps. Help." The footsteps grew louder, pacing them, a steady rhythm that felt like a heartbeat in the earth. Ellie's mind raced to the article. Hikers stalked by a figure, never caught, their presence a shadow that clung to the trail. The whistle turned into a low laugh, chillingly close, cutting through the wind like a blade. Nate grabbed her hand, his grip tight, his knife now drawn. "Run," he said, pulling her down the trail, rocks skidding under their boots, the pines blurring past. The footsteps followed, faster, joined by a second set, lighter but relentless, weaving through the trees like wolves on a scent. They ducked into a boulder field, hiding behind a slab of granite, its surface cold and rough against their backs, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp stone. Ellie's breath was shallow, her sketchbook pressed against her chest, its pages crumpled, her pencil lost somewhere on the trail. The footsteps paused, then resumed, splitting, one set climbing the ridge above, the other staying below, as if coordinating a trap. The laugh echoed again, circling closer, as if the figure knew exactly where they were. Ellie's phone buzzed, no signal, but her text had sent, a faint lifeline in the dark. The article hadn't mentioned pairs, but the terror was the same. Hikers hunted, their escape narrowing with every step. The whistle returned, sharper, a call and response between the two sets of footsteps, like hunters signaling in the dusk. Ellie's legs cramped, her body trembling from cold and fear, the boulder's chill seeping through her jacket. "They know my name," she whispered to Nate, her voice shaking, remembering the article's warning of voices that knew too much, luring hikers into ambushes. Night fell, the air freezing, the boulders casting jagged shadows in the moonlight that broke through the clouds. The footsteps circled closer, deliberate, the taller figure's boots heavy, scraping gravel. The lighter one steps silent but swift, like a ghost's tread. Ellie. A voice called from the ridge, low and deliberate, cutting through the wind. Her name, how? She hadn't spoken it aloud, not even to Nate. His face was pale, his knife glinting faintly, his eyes wide with the same fear. The article's story replayed, hikers hearing their names, trapped by unseen watchers who knew their every move. They stayed hidden, the boulder their only shield, the wind carrying the whistle, now a hum, rhythmic and eerie, like a chant from some forgotten ritual. Ellie whispered to the operator, the call reconnecting faintly. 2 figures now. They know my name. Near mile 112, PCT. The operator's voice was distant, crackling. Rangers are 10 minutes out. Stay low, don't engage. A rock skidded nearby, kicked deliberately, landing inches from their hiding spot, dust rising in the moonlight. Ellie stifled a gasp, her hand shaking around her phone, her other hand clutching Nate's sleeve, his knife raised like a talisman. The hum grew louder, the footsteps tightening their circle, the taller figure's shadow looming on the ridge above, its jacket flapping like a tattered flag. The smaller, hooded figure appeared below, moving silently, a blade glinting in its hand, a knife, its edge catching the moonlight. Ellie's heart pounded so loud, she was sure they'd hear it, her mind racing. Had they been watched from the trailhead, her sketchbook's cover with her name visible? The article mentioned no groups, but the fear was the same. Hikers cornered, their sanctuary a trap. Time dragged, the cold seeping into their bones, the hum relentless, vibrating through the granite. The figures paused, their shadows still, as if listening. Ellie's breath was visible, her body shaking, the boulder's rough surface scraping her back. A faint shout broke the silence. National Park Service. Followed by the crunch of multiple boots, flashlights slicing through the dark like beacons. The figures froze, then bolted, their footsteps scattering into the rocks, the hum fading like a dying echo. Ellie and Nate stayed hidden, trembling, until a ranger's voice called. Ellie? Nate, it's safe. They emerged, their clothes torn, faces streaked with dirt and sweat, the boulder field a maze of shadows. The rangers searched, finding fresh tracks on the ridge. 2 sets, one heavy, one light, but no one was caught. The tracks matched boots from an unsolved missing hiker case, leading to a cliff's edge and stopping, as if the figures had vanished into the air. A discarded knife lay nearby, its handle carved with a crude eye, like the symbols in the article's stories. Ellie and Nate reached their car at dawn, the lake's beauty a mockery, its glassy surface hiding the terror of the night. Ellie quit hiking, her sketchbook blank, its pages crumpled from the night's panic. She moved back to San Francisco, but the mountain silence followed her, the figure's voice calling her name, a scar that echoed in every quiet moment, a wound that refused to heal. Nate returned to his ranger duties, but his eyes carried a new wariness, the ridge's shadow a permanent mark on his memory. Campfire shadows. The Smoky Mountains in Tennessee were a lush labyrinth of rolling ridges and shadowed hollows, their trails thick with oak and laurel, alive with birdsong by day, but cloaked in an eerie hush at night. Becca, a 21-year-old college student from Knoxville, had spent the semester drowning in anthropology essays and part-time shifts at a coffee shop, her life a blur of deadlines and spilled lattes. This weekend hike was her escape, a chance to write poetry in her journal, to find words for the restlessness that gnawed at her. Her cousin Liam, a biology major with a passion for the Smokies wildlife, joined her, his pack stuffed with a field guide, binoculars, and a camera for spotting rare salamanders. Their tent and sleeping bags were packed for a night under the stars, the trail a muddy challenge from spring rains, its path winding through dense forest where the air smelled of wet leaves and earth. They'd read about hikers seeing shadows around campfires, figures lurking just beyond the light, and laughed it off as campfire tales. But as dusk settled, the forest silence felt alive, its shadows deeper, as if the trees themselves were watching. They reached a clearing by a stream at dusk. the water gurgling softly over smooth stones, its sound a faint comfort against the gathering dark. Becca set up the tent, her hands steady from years of camping with her dad, while Liam gathered wood, his boots sinking into the pine needle carpet. The fire crackled to life, its flames dancing on the surrounding trees, casting flickering shadows that seemed to move on their own. Liam roasted marshmallows, his ghost stories filling the air, his voice low and playful, but Becca's eyes kept drifting to the forest's edge, where the shadows seemed to shift, fluid and wrong, like ink spilling across the ground. A rustle came, like footsteps circling the clearing, too rhythmic for a deer or raccoon, too deliberate for the wind. Just an animal, Liam said, his smile forced, his hand pausing over the fire, the marshmallow browning to a crisp. The rustling grew closer, pacing the clearing's perimeter, a steady crunch of pine needles that matched their quickening breaths. Becca's heart raced as she grabbed her flashlight, its beam trembling as she swept it across the trees, catching only branches and leaves. But the shadows seemed to retreat, then return taller, more human-shaped, just beyond the firelight. "Liam," she whispered, her voice shaking, her journal forgotten on the ground. He saw it too, his face pale, his marshmallow stick dropping into the flames, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Footsteps crunched, multiple sets now, circling tighter, their rhythms synchronized, like a pack closing in. Becca fumbled with her phone, no signal in the mountain's depths, and dialed 911, whispering, "We're camping in Smoky Mountains, Site 12. Someone's out there. Shadows by the fire." The call dropped, the screen mocking her with its blank bars. "Stay by the fire," Liam said, grabbing a thick branch, its end charred from the flames, his eyes wide with the fear he tried to hide. The shadows shifted closer, their outlines flickering like ghosts, tall and lean, their movements fluid yet deliberate. A low voice murmured, words indistinct but unmistakably human, coming from the trees, a soft chant that sent chills down Becca's spine. The article's warning echoed, campers stalked by unseen watchers, their fear feeding something in the dark. She texted her mom, her fingers shaking, shadows around camp, hearing voices. Scared, the footsteps stopped, then a rock landed near the fire, sparking embers, rolling into the grass with a dull thud. Becca screamed, clutching Liam's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. The fire's warmth no longer a comfort. They doused the fire, hoping darkness would hide them, and crawled into the tent, zipping it shut, the nylon walls flimsy against the night's weight. The footsteps resumed, circling, a soft laugh joining them, cold and mocking, like a predator toying with prey. "Becca," a voice said, clear and chilling, as if pressed against the tent, the fabric rippling slightly. Her name, how? They hadn't spoken it aloud, not once. Liam's eyes widened, his branch raised like a club, his breath visible in the cold air. The article's terror replayed, hikers hearing their names, trapped by voices that knew too much. The tent shook, a hand brushing the fabric, slow and deliberate, testing its strength, the nylon creaking under the pressure. Becca's breath was shallow, her journal clutched to her chest, its pages blank with fear, the poetry she'd hoped to write lost to panic. The laugh returned, joined by a second voice, lower, rougher, from the opposite side of the tent. "Liam," it said, drawn out, mocking, the word curling through the air like smoke, his face drained of color, his hands trembling, the branch shaking in his grip. The footsteps tightened their circle, the tent's walls rippling as if pressed by multiple hands, the nylon tearing slightly, a small rip exposing the night's chill. Becca's phone buzzed, no signal, but her text had sent, a faint hope in the dark. The article mentioned no groups, but the fear was the same. Campers surrounded, their sanctuary a trap. The night stretched, the air cold and heavy, the fire's ashes cold outside, their scent mingling with the damp earth. A low chant started, words indistinct but rhythmic, like a ritual carried on the wind, rising and falling in a cadence that felt ancient, hungry. Becca's skin crawled. She pictured cultists or drifters, the shadow's makers marking their prey with names stolen from the dark. The brushing on the tent grew insistent, the rip widening, a cold breeze slipping through. Liam swung his branch at the sound, hitting nothing but air, the impact echoing in the tent's confines. The chant grew louder, the footsteps relentless, pacing just beyond the walls, their rhythm a heartbeat in the night. A shadow moved outside, tall and lean, its outline sharp against the tent's fabric, joined by another, smaller, its movements quick and silent. Becca's heart pounded, her mind racing. Had they been watched from the trailhead, their names overheard at a rest stop? The article warned of traps, of hikers lured into the dark by voices that knew their fears. The tent shook harder, a hand pressing against the door, the zipper straining. Becca whispered a prayer, her voice trembling, her journal's edges digging into her chest. The chant turned into a hum, low and resonant, vibrating through the ground, as if the forest itself was singing. A distant shout broke through, National Park Service, followed by the crunch of multiple boots, flashlights slicing the dark like knives. The footsteps fled, scattering into the forest, the chant fading like a dying echo, leaving only the stream's gurgle. Becca and Liam stayed frozen, their breaths loud in the silence, until a ranger's voice called, "Becca!" "Liam, it's safe." They unzipped the tent, stumbling out, their faces streaked with tears and dirt, the clearing empty but for the scattered embers and a knife stuck in a tree, its blade etched with a crude figure, its eyes hollow, staring. The rangers searched, finding footprints circling the camp. Dozens, too many for one or two people, some fresh, some older, as if the clearing had been watched for days. They found a tattered journal, not Becca's, hidden in the underbrush, its pages filled with sketches of shadowed figures and names. Becca, Liam, others, written in a shaky hand. The knife matched ones found near missing hiker sites, its etchings a chilling echo of the article's warnings, but no culprits were caught. Becca and Liam packed up at dawn, the stream's gentle flow now a threat, the forest's beauty a lie that hid the shadow's gaze. They drove back to Knoxville, the fire's ashes a memory, the shadow's voices clinging to them like damp leaves. Becca's journal remained blank, her poetry unwritten, the names in the dark a terror that lingered in every quiet moment, a scar that burned when she closed her eyes. Liam threw out his field guide, his love for the Smokies tainted, the forest silence now a scream that followed him home. The trail that wasn't. The Olympic National Forest in Washington was a cathedral of ancient cedar and moss, its trails weaving through a green twilight where sunlight struggled to pierce the canopy. Zoe, a 28-year-old writer from Portland, had spent months wrestling with her horror novel, a story of lost souls in a haunted forest, her apartment cluttered with coffee cups and crumpled drafts. This solo hike was her chance to find inspiration, to let the wilderness breathe life into her words. Her pack held a notebook, a water filter, a GPS that flickered under the dense trees, and a worn map she'd studied for weeks. She planned a 2-day loop, craving the forest's quiet to spark her creativity. But by noon on her first day, the trail faded, replaced by a faint path of trampled moss and broken branches, unmarked on her map or GPS. She'd read about hikers finding paths that weren't there, like a trail leading to a strange clearing, and dismissed it as myth. But now the forest silence felt wrong, like a held breath, its shadows alive with unseen eyes. Zoe checked her GPS offline, its screen blank, the battery draining faster than it should in the damp air. The path was clear, almost deliberate, as if someone had walked it recently. The moss flattened, branches snapped with purpose. She followed it, hoping it looped back to the main trail, her boots sinking into soft earth, the air thick with the scent of cedar, fern, and something sharper like decay. The trees grew denser, their branches knitting a ceiling that dimmed the light to a sickly green, the forest's hush broken only by her breaths and the occasional drip of water from leaves. A pile of stones caught her eye, stacked neatly in a pyramid, their surfaces scratched with odd marks, runes or symbols, jagged and uneven, like a child's angry scribbles. The article story flashed through her mind. A hiker followed an unmarked trail, finding signs of someone living in the woods, their presence a quiet threat. Zoe snapped a photo, her hands trembling. Cameras clicked loud in the stillness, echoing like a warning. A rustle came from behind, like footsteps pacing her, soft but steady, crunching moss with purpose. She spun, her flashlight sweeping the path, catching only gnarled trunks and tangled ferns, their shapes twisting in the beam. "Hello," she called, her voice small, swallowed by the forest's weight. No answer, but the footsteps resumed, closer, deliberate, as if testing her nerve. Zoe's heart raced as she dialed 911, whispering, "I'm on an unmarked trail in Olympic Forest, near mile 45. Someone's following me." The call dropped, the signal dead under the canopy. She texted her editor, Maya, her fingers shaking. "On weird trail, hearing steps, found stones. Scared. The path led deeper, the stone piles more frequent, each larger, their scratches more intricate, forming patterns that felt like a language she couldn't read, a message meant for someone else." The footsteps grew louder, pacing her, joined by a low hum, like chanting from a distant throat, faint but rhythmic, vibrating through the air. Zoe's blood ran cold. The article mentioned hiker hearing voices on a strange trail, never finding the source, their fear growing with every step. She quickened her pace, the path twisting into a ravine, its walls steep and slick with moss, the air colder, heavier, as if the forest was closing in. The hum intensified, words indistinct but heavy with intent, like a ritual carried on the wind. Zoe's mind raced. Had she wandered into a squatter's territory, a hermit's hidden domain, or something older, tied to the ruins? The article warned of hidden camps, their owners protective, dangerous, their motives unknown. She stumbled into a clearing, a sagging tent at its center, its fabric torn, stained with mud and something darker, dried, crusted, like blood. More stone piles surrounded it, some topped with bones, small, animal-like, but too clean, too arranged, their surfaces etched with the same runes. Zoe's breath hitched, her knife out, its blade trembling in her hand as she approached the tent. The hum stopped, the footsteps pausing, but the silence was worse, thick with expectation, as if the forest was waiting. She peered inside, empty, but a sleeping bag was unzipped, still warm, as if someone had just left. A journal lay open, its pages filled with sketches of the runes, crude figures with hollow eyes, and a name scrawled in the margin. Zoe. Her heart stopped. She hadn't told anyone her name out here, not even Maya. The article's terror replayed, hikers finding signs meant for them, lures to trap them in the dark. Footsteps crunched behind her, fast and heavy, snapping twigs like gunfire. She spun, seeing a figure, tall, hooded, standing at the clearing's edge, a blade glinting in its hand, its edge sharp and cold. "You shouldn't be here," it said, voice low, almost sorrowful, as if speaking to a ghost. Zoe ran, the path twisting, branches tearing at her skin, her pack bouncing painfully, her notebook slipping from her grasp, its pages fluttering like lost thoughts. The footsteps followed, joined by others, lighter, from multiple directions, like a pack closing in, their rhythm a heartbeat in the dark. She ducked into a thicket, thorns cutting her hands, her breath ragged, the air thick with the scent of sap and fear. The hum resumed, louder, the voices chanting her name now, a chorus that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "Zoe, Zoe, Zoe." Her GPS flickered, showing her miles off course, deep in uncharted forest, the map useless. Her phone buzzed, Maya's reply, called rangers. "Stay safe." No signal to respond, but the text had sent, a faint hope against the growing dark. The forest was a maze now. Path gone, the stone piles are only markers, their runes glowing faintly in the twilight, as if alive. Zoe hid behind a cedar, its bark rough, her knife slick with sweat, her body trembling from cold and terror. The chanting grew, relentless, the footsteps tightening their circle, their rhythm deliberate, like hunters savoring the chase. A second figure appeared, smaller, cloaked, moving silently, its eyes catching her flashlight's beam. Dark, unblinking, human yet wrong. Zoe's mind churned. Had they seen her at the trailhead? Her notebook's cover with her name visible? Or was this something else? Something tied to the rooms, the bones, the tent? The thicket offered little cover, its thorns tearing at her clothes, her skin stinging with shallow cuts. The chanting turned into a low wail, rising and falling, like a song of loss or hunger. Zoe's breath was shallow, her heart pounding so loud it seemed to echo in the trees. The article mentioned no groups, but the fear was the same. Hikers lost, their names known by unseen watchers who moved with purpose. A twig snapped nearby, deliberate, a taller figure's shadow looming through the ferns, its blade glinting like a promise. Zoe clutched her knife, its blade small but sharp, her hands shaking as she pictured the journal sketches, the hollow eyes staring back. A ranger's shout broke through. National Park Service. Followed by flashlights cutting the dark, their beams harsh against the cedars, scattering shadows like startled birds. The figures fled, their footsteps scattering, the chanting fading into a whisper, then silence. Zoe stayed hidden, trembling, her clothes torn, her hands bloodied from thorns, until a ranger's voice called, "Zoe, it's safe." She emerged, her knife still clutched, her face streaked with dirt and tears. The clearing empty, but for the tent and stones, their runes now dull in the ranger's lights. The rangers searched, finding the tent, the bones, and a knife with the same runes, left by the path, its blade stained with something dark. The site matched reports of a missing hiker's camp, abandoned years ago, its owner never found. The runes linked to other disappearances, their meaning unknown. Zoe's notebook was gone, lost in the thicket, its pages scattered like her thoughts. She drove back to Portland at dawn, her novel unwritten, the forests on a pulse in her dreams, her name in the dark a terror that clung to every quiet moment, a wound that refused to heal.